Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Coast to Coast Hockey. Today, we're going to be talking about everything to do with the Dallas Stars. I'm Cameron.
I'm Noel.
And I'm Nick.
Let's get into it.
Somewhat quiet offseason for the Stars here as they are cap constrained, but they did manage to bring in Matt Duchene, Sam Steele, and Craig Smith. More on those guys later. They also had some other depth pieces and Jordy Ben on a PTO looking to reunite the Ben brothers there.
On the subtractions front, Max Domi moves to Toronto, Colin Miller was traded to New Jersey, Luke Glendening is now in Tampa, and Yoki Viranta, Riley Tufte, and Marian Studnich have also found different teams this offseason. On to the biggest arrivals for the Dallas Stars. Matt Duchene is the most prominent option here out of the three. Matt Duchene is a 32-year-old, primarily centerman, but can play right wing. 5'11", 195 pounds, who was brought on a one-year deal at $3 million after being bought out by the Nashville Predators of his 8-year, $8 million per year contract. This was quite surprising to many hockey fans because Matt Duchene previously had put up 56 points in 71 games and then 86 points, including 43 goals just 2 years ago. So it was pretty mind-boggling to see that this was a huge culture change for the Nashville Predators, but now he finds himself in the hands of the Dallas Stars at a one-year, $3 million deal. It'll be interesting to see where he fits in the lineup.
Sam Steele is a former first-round pick that has struggled finding consistency at the NHL level. In limited minutes last year, he put up 28 points with the Minnesota Wild, where he spent some time playing with Kirill Kaprizov, so definitely has some skill. He signed a one-year, $850,000 salary with the Dallas Stars here and will be an RFA at the end of it.
Craig Smith used to be a very good two-way player and is still a serviceable player in his advanced age. He's going to bring a lot of experience as a veteran of over 800 NHL games. Even though he's regressed a bit here, a season ago he put up 36 points with the Boston Bruins. He had a very good tenure at the beginning with the Bruins and a long tenure with the Nashville Predators before that. Moving on to the future outlook for the Dallas Stars. This is a team that's accrued a pretty good prospect pool despite competing year after year. It all starts with top prospect Logan Stankoven, as well as a guy like Maverick Bourque, Leon Bichelle, and Kristen Kyrou, among some other ones of note there too.
And looking at the draft capital here, they do have all three of their first round picks, which is within the next 3 years, which is a great sign to see. So, wondering if they will spend some of those at the deadline to try and bolster their roster.
Onto the prospect spotlight for the Dallas Stars. And as Cam mentioned, the Dallas Stars have been competing for the playoffs in the Stanley Cup year after year, but have still accrued some decent draft capital. Within that capital, they have been able to make some steals in the draft, one being Logan Stankoven. As you can see at the bottom left there, he was drafted number 47 in the 2021 draft and has now seen as one of the best prospects outside the National Hockey League. This is because of his time in the WHL with the Kamloops Blazers, where he most recently served as captain last year and put up 97 points in 48 games. The year before, he put up 104 in 59. This guy is clearly too good for the WHL. It is time to turn pro. And being so that he is 20 years old, he is now going to be playing in the AHL next year. It is not sure if he will be making the NHL lineup this year, but at least he'll be in the AHL competing with the top prospects for the Stars. The second prospect of note is Maverick Bourque, and this is one of my favorite players going into the 2020 draft because of his crafty skill and his playmaking ability. He came from the QMJHL where he played with the Shawinigan Cataracts, and he put up over 2 points a game after being drafted. He put up 68 points in 31 games on Shawinigan as the captain for the second year in a row, and this was outstanding to see because of such high-quality production, where Logan Stankoven was putting up 2 points a game and Maverick Bourque was putting up 2 points a game in two of the top leagues in Canada. Now, after a solid year in the AHL last year with 47 points in 70 games, he looks to do his sophomore AHL season this year, and I expect a decent progression from last year, as he did have about 25 games at the beginning of the season where he only put up about 10 points in that span. He then pursued a 70-point pace the rest of the season practically. So I'm excited to see him continue to be a Dallas Stars player. I'm curious to see whether this guy is a prospect who gets moved in the future as well, because he has come up in trade talks and trade rumors recently. The third prospect of note is Leon Bichelle, and this is the most recent prospect from the 2022 draft, as Dallas did not have a first-round pick in the 2023 draft because of the Niels Lundqvist trade. Liam Bischel is a ginormous defenseman out of Sweden. He's actually a Swiss-born defenseman, and he performed exceptionally well for Switzerland at the international stage. He was one of the more notable players at the World Juniors. He played for Swiss in all minutes, and he was a great defensive defenseman, as you can see by those point totals there. He played against men last year, played 42 games, and put up 6 points, as well as 47 playing minutes. He's not a penalty-taking defenseman. He is more so a swift skating, despite being 6'5", with all the areas that you need to be a pro hockey player, and he's still at training camp today with the Dallas Stars, so I could see him competing for that spot in the AHL nevertheless, but drafted number 18th overall as well, so all three of these guys being drafted relatively late to where I believe they stand as prospects.
Moving on to the projected lineup for the Dallas Stars headed into the upcoming season. We begin with what is a pretty solid forward group here, in my opinion. Beginning with the first line that is probably one of the best in the NHL, with young emerging superstar Jason Robertson, one of the more underrated centers in the league, Rupe Hintz, and Joe Pavelski, who seems to be beating father time year in and year out and still putting up hyper-productive seasons, even in his advanced age, near the age of 40 now. As for the second line, a very solid second line with Jamie Benn, Wyatt Johnston, and Evgeny Dadonov. Be interesting to me to see if this remains the second line or if maybe those two middle nine lines swap there throughout the season, because that Mason Marchment, Tyler Seguin, Matt Duchene line to me is a elite third line in my opinion and would rival other teams' second line. So a really good middle six there. As far as the fourth line, we have Ty Dellandrea, Radek Faksa, and Craig Smith. So a good mix of physicality, some defensive mindedness, and Craig Smith there as well. So really good fourth line that's going to bring a lot of physicality and good forechecking ability, with new acquisition Sam Steele there as an extra as well.
Onto the projected defensive pairs for the Dallas Stars. The big key here is Miro Heiskanen. He is still playing on the right side despite being a left shot. He has seemed to become more comfortable being on the right side despite being a left-hand shot and playing mostly left-hand, left defense pairings in his time in Finland before he came over, as well as his first couple of years in the NHL. Nevertheless, he is carried by Ryan Suter on that pair. Obviously, Ryan Suter is the much better defenseman on that pair, so I'm looking forward to seeing both of them play together. The second pair is Esa Lindell alongside Nils Lundqvist. Last year, it was Lindell and Hakanpää as a pair the whole year, but they struggled. Their analytics were not great. Their Corsi was under 50%. They were overall a pretty defensively deficient pair, so they have split those two guys up this year, as you can see, and put the youngster Nils Lundqvist, who was acquired for a first-round pick last year. You've also got youngster Thomas Harley, who has finally pretty much made the team. He cemented his spot in the lineup after a strong showing last year towards the playoffs, and I really am hoping for this guy to pan out because he's such a great puck mover despite the size, and he can be a great piece to Dallas' future. He's also an option for that power play too, should Nils Lundqvist or Ryan Suter not be a piece there. The extra is Joe Hanley, longtime Dallas Star extra. Joe Hanley was there in COVID, sitting in the box all the playoffs long, and then showed up for a game and scored his first NHL goal in the playoffs. So that's a pretty cool story to hear. Joe Hanley should be a great piece to this extras, and Gavin Bayreuther was also sent down to the AHL most recently. So if both of these guys are clear waivers and sent down, then this is a pretty good decor overall.
And Jake Ottinger really emerged onto the scene 2 years ago with that amazing performance in the playoffs against the Calgary Flames, where they ultimately came short. But Jake Ottinger really did everything he could to will them to win. And then this past regular season, he was also very solid. Into the playoffs, he wasn't able to repeat that same playoff prowess that we saw from him before. But nonetheless, Jake Ottinger is a very solid starter in the NHL and is looking for another big regular season here. Scott Wedgwood is also a very capable backup, so a good 1-2 punch there for the Dallas Stars. And then Matthew Murray, not to be confused with Matt Murray of the Toronto Maple Leafs, is a nice third string goaltender there, some nice depth.
Moving on to the storyline surrounding the Dallas Stars in the upcoming season. The first one we have here is just wondering how the new big acquisition, Matt Duchene, will fit in. I think what's interesting here to note is the fact that he signed the exact same contract that Max Domi was on. So I think as a one-for-one replacement, it's a really good move to bring him in, as he probably has higher upside than Max Domi did. But in terms of the past couple of years for Matt Duchene, in 2021, 2022, This is a player who put up 43 goals and 86 points in 78 games with the Nashville Predators. So an incredible season for him. Over 40 goals is incredible for any player in the NHL. But last year he struggled a bit with 22 goals and 56 points in 71 games. And this is what led to his buyout from the Nashville Predators. I mean, I guess the thing was that Barry Trotz was looking for a culture reset, and he didn't see Matt Duchene as part of the future there. So a very costly buyout, as we've gotten into before on this channel. But uh, how do you guys believe that Matt Duchene will fit into this Dallas Stars forward group?
The saying goes, one man's trash is another man's treasure, and I think that really fits for the Dallas Stars here. I believe Matt Duchene will do very well in Dallas, and at that $3 million cap hit, that is a really nice piece of work by Jim Neal. He's the GM, right? The Dallas Stars. So uh, great work for him. I think Duchene will fit nicely on that either third or second line, as you were mentioning, Cam. And he's only 1 year removed from a really good season, almost point per game season with the Nashville Predators. So I think. I think he'll do very well with Dallas, and especially as they have such an elite offense, he'll fit nicely in.
Yeah, Matt Duchene is undeniably a great offensive options for any NHL team at this point in his career. He's still only 32 years of age. He's not some 35-year-old that was being overpaid, in my opinion. I think $8 million for 86 points, if he can regain that. Obviously, if you look just at base stats, last year was not a great year for $8 million players. But at the same time, getting this gift from the Nashville Predators into your lineup, and surprisingly on the third line in our rankings, like it's a pretty deep lineup already. But adding Matt Duchene is quite the piece to add for your Stanley Cup aspirations.
Yeah, at a massive discount as well, as you said there. And uh, what would you guys consider for a over/under point total for Matt Duchene headed into this season?
I think it's hard to predict because we don't really know where he is projected to play in the lineup, what kind of exposure he's going to get. I don't think he's going to be top power play. That being said, I think around 50, 60 points is a fairly reasonable estimate.
Yeah, I agree. I'd say 55 points on the Dallas Stars third line is much more impressive than 56 points last year on the Nashville Predators first line. I do think the minutes will be interesting to balance in Dallas because of you got the top line there with Robertson, Hintz, Pavelski. That should be a line that's out there a lot. Then you've got Ben and Wyatt Johnston, who have been a duo for the last year, and Dodonov coming over in trade was a huge piece of that sort of creation of that chemistry. So that's a line that needs some minutes. And then you've got Marchment, Seguin, and Duchene that need minutes as well. So I don't know how you're going to spread those minutes between those three quality lines, but I'm curious to see, depending on the opportunity that Matt Duchene gets, whether he can produce 55 points.
Yeah, this is a guy to me that in our recent fantasy draft, my brother was ecstatic to scoop up late in the draft because of the high upside here. I think he's going to bounce back and have over 60 points, in my opinion. I think that's definitely reasonable in this highly offensively skilled team. So I'd put it around 60 points, much similar to you guys there. So moving on to our next storyline, and it's wondering whether Mason Marchment can bounce back. At first glance, it doesn't seem as though he regressed too badly year over year from 2 years ago to last year, as his point totals were 31 and 47. But when you look into it a bit more, it's a bit different than you would think at first glance. In 2022-2023, he had 12 goals and 31 points and 88 hits, which is a big part of his game, the physicality, in 68 games. The season before that, he managed 18 goals and 47 points in 14 less games, so 54 games, sorry. And he also had 114 hits that year. So it seems like this is a guy who unfortunately lost a bit of the aggressiveness that made him such an effective player a couple seasons ago with the Florida Panthers. And I guess we're going to be just seeing this season whether he's able to regain, I guess, that aggressiveness and offensive upside that he showed in Florida.
Yeah, I remember when he was playing on Florida, he really wasn't given that much opportunity. He was playing down in the lineup, not much ice time, and he really made the most of it, posting that impressive stat line, 47 points that you're saying. So it was kind of unfortunate to see in the first year of his contract that he couldn't live up to the hype in Dallas, but I still think he's a very solid player and at a reasonable cap hit. It's not that he's very overpaid. So I think we will see a bit of a bounce back for him this season. He definitely has to get involved in the play, whether it's not scoring, he'll get involved physically. So he's going to be doing something out there, and I think he'll do fine this season.
Yeah, this is a player that was signed to $4.5 million per year after just a couple of years of NHL lineup opportunity. He played with Toronto in 4 games in 2019. He played with Florida 33 games in 2020. He played in Florida 54 games and then put up that awesome 47 points in 54 game span in 2021. And then this most recent year put up only 31 points with Dallas in 68 games. Now, I'm worried about this guy because of his age. He's already 28 years of age, and I'm curious to see how much better he can get from that 47-point year. Obviously, this past year was not an indication of that 47-point option for him, but I look at some key analytics that will sort of hurt his case as a future Dallas Star. He misses the net on unblocked shots almost 30% of the time. This is quite bad. This is in the bottom 10% of the league, basically. So basically, every time he takes a shot, 30% of the time he's going to miss the net when it's just a free shot at the net, basically. He also took 25 minor penalties last year, which is quite a lot. This is up with like the Tkachuk brothers in the top sort of like 15 forwards in the league. He also only shot 8% last year compared to 15% in his career year with Florida. And he's also, last year, was the second worst on the team in high danger chances, meaning in the house, close to the net, opportunities that are going to likely result in goals. He was second worst to only Ty Dellandrea among forwards. These are all troubling statistics to look at for someone who should be an analytical darling coming out of that crazy year that no one had expected of 47 points, 54 games. But overall, I really wish the best for him next year as he continues to find his spot. If he's alongside Tyler Seguin and Matt Duchene, it'll be very hard to fail. So I really hope that he does find his stride and he's able to hit the net more as well as, produce from the high danger areas.
Yeah, to me, this is a guy who's obviously dealt with some adversity in the past couple of years. And on top of that, this is a guy who's never been handed anything in his career. I can't remember if he was undrafted or not. I believe he was, but
Yep.
he had to work his way up through the professional ranks with the Marlies and all those different teams. There was a lot of times that it wasn't assured he would ever become an NHL player. So I think he's primed for a bounce back season, in my opinion, especially if he's able to refine that aggressiveness. I think that's such a key part of his game. And I also think the arrival of Matt Duchene is really going to benefit him as it really improves the offensive upside of that line that he's on with Tyler Seguin, because Matt Duchene is, let's be real, Tyler Seguin is not the player he once was. I don't think he's capable of driving a line anymore. Matt Duchene is more than capable of driving a second or third line. And I think that Mason Marchment will be able to ride shotgun on that line and reap the benefits.
Physical scoring wingers or just players in the NHL are pretty rare. So I think he does bring a lot of intangibles to this team more than just points. And yeah, Cam, he just has to refine that aggressiveness. I know there were some off ice issues out of his control last season. So hopefully those are past and is looking for a big season here.
Yeah, absolutely. And to further promote the idea of Duchene on the same line as him, this takes some space that he might need. It's possible that last year playing with guys like Tyler Seguin, who don't do well under pressure in space, with a lack of space for that rather, he didn't have enough space to be creative and do what he wants to do with the puck, so he ended up just giving it away. So I'm curious to see if Matt Duchene, who is very puck possessive and is able to sort of command that space, maybe that will give a lot of opportunities on the offside for Mason Marchment to sort of burst up the wing, perhaps, where Matt Duchene is sort of have all the eyes on him because he's the guy with the puck who's driving that line.
The last thing I'll say here is this is a guy who is kind of a poster boy of the anger of Leafs fans with Kyle Dubas trading him for Dennis Malgin at one point. So it's just been really interesting. I've followed his career all along. So it's really interesting to see him have the highs and the lows of his career at this point. So I really hope he's able to find what Dallas saw in him when they signed him to the big money contract that he was deserving of in a couple off seasons ago. Moving on to our final storyline here. Just wondering whether or not this decor is going to be good enough. It's funny. For a lot of the videos, it was wondering whether the goaltending tandems were going to be good enough. And now it's becoming a bit of a recurring theme at the top, whether these decors are going to be good enough. So as you can see there, the picture of Ryan Suter, this is a guy who's really lost a step since his days in Nashville and Minnesota. So I think he's kind of the poster boy here for kind of, I guess, the angst of Dallas Stars fans in their worry about this defensive core. You also look at a guy like Jenny Hakanpää, who is great physical guy, but maybe not one of the most all-around defenders in the NHL. And then you have some younger guys looking to take a step like Thomas Harley too. So a very interesting mixed bag of defensive players this year.
I don't like judging players on physical appearance, but Suter really looks like your average suburban dad at a barbecue. Like he looks pretty old. And another point I want to make is where would this team be without Miro Heiskanen? Like their decor would just be in shambles if they didn't have that young stud out there. Heiskanen's absolutely phenomenal D that I think covers up some of the weaknesses of this decor.
Yeah, Miro Heiskanen is the reason why the Dallas Stars can make the playoffs every year. He commands the puck, and he plays 30 to 33 minutes every single night of the year. This is Cale Makar territory when it comes to being that important to your team. And at the same time, you look down the rest of the lineup, the next best guy, arguably this year, is going to be Thomas Harley on that third pair. Esa Lindell has lost his touch sort of as a defender as well. Him and Hakanpää both really struggled. They struggled together, even though they're both pretty defensive-minded. So I'm curious to see if Esa Lindell can rebound because he's still making $5.8 million for the next 2 seasons, and he has pretty much no offensive production, roughly maybe 20 to 30 points a year. Ryan Suter, as we talked about, has lost another step year after year. He got exposed in the playoffs pretty heavily against Vegas, unfortunately, live on national television, so that's tough to see for him. But if he can play alongside Heiskanen or even down the lineup, I prefer Heiskanen to be sort of cast away from that, to be able to be more free on the ice. We'll see what Ryan Suter holds for the Dallas Stars this year, but he is also locked in at around $3.7 million for the next 2 seasons. Down the lineup, you've got some question marks. Nils Lundkvist is a huge question mark for me. He was scratched pretty much the rest of the regular season after he had some pretty awful defensive errors. They were quite notable in the games, but I really hoped that they would just let him keep playing because he's such a young player still. He's only 23 years of age and only a few seasons of NHL experience under his belt, and a few of those also being with the New York Rangers, who have been known to sort of mismanage their prospects in development. I'm really curious to see if Nils Lundkvist can perform as a top 4 NHL defenseman, but at the same time, he was scratched all of the playoffs last year, having to sit around and just practice with the team, so I worry for his development, and I worry if this is more of a long-term project now, more than short-term option for them. The last point I want to make about Thomas Harley is that this is going to be a guy who's going to have to take some heavy minutes away from those declining older players. So I'm curious to see who ends up in the top 4 by the end of the year. They may have to acquire someone.
Yeah, for me, I had no idea that Esa Lindell was making so much money. I was unaware that his cap hit is bordering on the line of $6 million. To me, I really look at Nils Lundkvist as the guy here who has to step up in a big way and become a bona fide top 4 defenseman for this team to have some serious success in the playoffs. From your perspective, Nick, do you think with the offense kind of short up in the way they've done it with the Matt Duchene acquisition, do you think they might look to add to the blue line at the deadline?
Yeah. As we've talked about with many teams, there are very few dollars available to spend on these guys. But as we know, in the cap world, the deadline cap space is a thing that happens. You get a bit of extra spending near the deadline based on what you've accrued throughout the season. So I do look for them to add a defender, depending on Thomas Harley. That is the key factor here. I'd rather focus on him than Nils Lundkvist personally to take all the pressure and burden off of Nils Lundkvist. I feel like he's such a humble guy, and I think he really works really hard, and he wants to be a quality NHL defender, and his mistakes sort of get, right in the media and sort of negatively affect his brand as a player. But I really hope Thomas Harley takes an extra step so that you have one guy on each pair, basically. You have Heiskanen in the top pair, then you've got Lindell, who maybe can regain some form to help Lundkvist out, and then you've got Harley holding the third pair down. Those are 3 okay defense pairs with Miro Heiskanen as the notable star. If they're going to acquire somebody, I have no idea who they would acquire, but I do like the idea of Dylan DeMello as a defensive option. He'd be such a stout defender for that team that desperately needs defense, because otherwise they're going to have to win every game, probably 6-5.
I was gonna guess you were gonna say Dylan DeMello. I just had a feeling.
Yeah, I love that guy.
That'd be a great addition here because he's a right shot defenseman, I believe, who'd probably be able to play up on that top pair with Miro Heiskanen. So that would probably make a lot of sense in terms of an addition there.
Their offense is definitely capable of putting up 6 goals pretty consistently, but that's a strategy that may bode well in the regular season. But when it comes to playoff time, it's a bit tighter checking, a bit more physical. Yeah, I think this defense core could get exposed, similar to how we saw last year with Ryan Suter and others.
I guess the one last thing we haven't mentioned here is the fact that with some of the questions on defense, this is a team that's very lucky, unlike other teams, to have a sure thing in net in Jake Ottinger, who season in, season out is going to be one of the elite goalies in the NHL. Moving on to our final segment, a bit of an overview of the Dallas Stars offseason and upcoming season. We're going to begin with an offseason grade. We're going to go with an A-. This is a high grade because they were able to do so much with so little in terms of cap space. Bringing in Duchesne, Sam Steele, and Craig Smith are all serviceable players with some of them with high upsides, and then others just role players who will be able to fill in and munch minutes in that forward group. The reason it's discounted a little bit to an A- is the fact that they haven't addressed some of the defensive concerns that I guess Dallas Stars fans are really worried about. Moving on to the on-ice grades, in terms of the offensive strength, it's going to be an A. This is a team that has an incredibly deep offensive group. Maybe doesn't have some of the higher upside of some of the teams like Toronto or Edmonton, but this is a team that's got a very deep offensive group. So no issue there with an A. In terms of the defensive strength, it's going to be a B+. This mainly comes from the fact that they have Miro Heiskanen, who is probably a top 5 defenseman in the NHL at this point. I think every year he's just getting better and better and really emerging as one of the best two-way defensemen in the NHL. So that's going to bump up what would probably be a bit worse of a defensive core, really much worse defensive core without him. Moving on to the goaltending strength, that's going to be an A. This is a team that has one of the elite goalies in the NHL with Jake Ottinger and a very serviceable backup in Scott Wedgwood, who was able to fill in admirably when Ottinger wasn't playing last year. So really good tandem there with Jake Ottinger going to be getting most of the starts as usual. In terms of the future outlook, this is a team with young stars like Jason Robertson, Rupe Hintz, Wyatt Johnson, Miro Heiskanen, some good young defensemen who are developing in the NHL right now, as well as a pretty good prospect pool. So I'm going to go with an A- there.
Yeah, and sorry to pipe in here, but just to keep in mind that Logan Stankoven and Maverick Bourque are unlikely to make the National Hockey League roster on opening night, which I find pretty surprising because they are such quality players that probably could make the bottom 6 or middle 6, frankly, of a lot of other teams in the National Hockey League.
The Stars are an interesting team in terms of build to look at. I mean, you have 2 aging former stars on massive contracts in Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn. And having 2 stars paid that much that are kind of on the tail end of their career doesn't really bode well for a contender. But then you have the emergence of Jason Robertson, Miro Heiskanen, and Jake Ottinger from that 2017 draft, and their continued excellent the draft picks that just keep on panning out. So we have Dallas placed first in the Central Division in our projected Western Conference standings. Just a nice mix of young and old players and a very solid goaltender in Jake Ottinger. So that's where we have him first in the Central.
Yeah, they've really done a great job of kind of, I guess, dovetailing the core of past years into this new and emerging core of Robertson, Hintz, and Heiskanen and Ottinger. So really great job there by GM Jim Nill. Moving on to our last graphic here, in terms of the individual rankings, Nick had them finishing 4th in the entire league. Noel had them finishing 5th. I personally had them finishing 2nd. So the aggregate ranking is going to be 4th with a firm hold on that top spot in the Central Division. For me, the reason I had them probably a bit higher than these guys is I look at this team and they have a superstar at every single position. They have a superstar winger in Jason Robertson, a superstar center in Rupe Hintz, a superstar defenseman in Miro Heiskanen, and a superstar goalie, which is more than can be said about a lot of teams. Personally, I think the Western Conference is a little bit weaker than the Eastern Conference, so that'll help them put up points and wins. So I just see this as a team that's going to be really able to capitalize on a bit of a weaker conference and the fact that they have such a complete offensive group. And I think having an elite defenseman and elite goalie kind of cover some of the blemishes that would otherwise be apparent. So that will do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. We hope to see you guys back in the next one as we get dangerously close to the end of this series. The next video will be the beginning of the top 3. So stay tuned to find out who our top 3 are in the entire NHL. And please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.